Welcome to H2O Croutons.
I'm Alexis.
And I'm Jennifer. Together, we're mother
and daughter co-host. Think Gen Z
meets Gen X and let the games begin. We're here to add a little crunch to your day with real talk on everything from A to Z.
From pop culture and the latest news to deep dives in topics that you didn't even know you cared about, we've got you covered.
So, grab a drink, get cozy, and let's dive in. This is H2O Croutons. Hey everyone, welcome back to H2O Croutons. This is Jennifer, your Gen X mom that everybody warned you about. Just kidding. Wait, they better not be warning you. Because that would be funny. Anyway, yeah. So, we'll be talking about cancel culture versus freedom of speech. You know, you've got a really complex ethical and philosophical debate about this. And the reason why is it's very complex. I think there's a little bit of a column A that's good and a little bit of column B. I kind of look at life that way. People say it's a glass half full, it's half empty, and I'm looking at it going, at least it's got something. I need to jump on board here and just say what cancel culture is. Basically, when somebody does something that someone perceives with their own perception to be something they don't agree with, whether it be an action or a word or maybe a product that they put on the market and they don't like it, they'll say, hey, everybody, don't shop here, don't go eat here. And you've got freedom of speech, which gives everyone this right. Obviously, there are certain limitations, but you're supposed to have this right to express your opinion without anybody telling you you can or cannot do it. And what's happening anymore is cancel culture is becoming so norm. And I've noticed it mostly with younger generations and older generations. Hello, boomers. And I don't see it so much with Gen X. I'm sure there are some that do. But I just sit here as a Gen X mom and go, what the hell is going on out there? Why are we at this stage where we just start telling people, well, I don't like you. You can't play with me and nobody's going to play with you. Dude, I'm not in kindergarten anymore. Yes, there are exceptions to every rule. You know, if somebody's gone out and they've done something and, I don't know, raped someone or murdered someone, yeah, that makes total sense. But if they've said something that you find offensive, say it's something, you know, as my daughter calls it, the alphabet mafia. I think she learned that from a friend of mine. If someone says something about gay people, let them. Who cares? Don't give the words power. But instead of doing that, you're giving it power by demanding everybody not, listen to them. And the funniest, weirdest part about it in some situations, obviously, is you're giving it more attention than it would have gotten before. And I can't tell you how many times I find out about something after the fact going, well, if you wouldn't have said anything about canceling them, I would have never known what they said and it wouldn't matter. But we also have this perception that if people say something, it's almost like if someone says something out loud, it makes it true. It doesn't. Let it go. Who cares? It's something we sit here and we teach our kids, whatever that, Johnny over there said about you and they're picking on you. They're just words. It's like water off a duck's back. Let it go. But then all of a sudden these kids transform into adults going, well, I don't like you because blah, blah, blah. I thought those words didn't hurt you. Didn't we teach you that? I've taught my daughter that. And she's not perfect at it either. I get it. But this knee-jerk reaction without having any context or knowing what exactly happened or just taking people's words for something seems really immature and, quite frankly, dangerous. You can destroy lives. Someday somebody's going to take their own life based on the bullying tactics of cancel culture. You've got freedom of speech, which tells people, hey, you have a right as an American, and you know who I'm talking to, because obviously I'm American. You can tell by, my accent that I'm a Midwestern American. Yeah, it's weird. Freedom of speech is supposed to give you this, right to say whatever you want. And instead, people are just going, no, you can't. So how does your freedom of expression trump, I don't mean that in the president Trump, but how does that trump someone else's right to freedom of speech? Just because you're you doesn't mean your freedom overrides somebody else's freedom. And that is something Americans are really bad at. And we need to recognize that because it causes problems. And you've got the whole philosophical thing, There are different types of philosophies out there, and I'm going to give you 4 that I have notes on here. There's John Stuart Mills, who believed in the harm principle, which is it's basically known as liberalism, and it allows for free speech that should only be restricted if it directly harms others. Well, if somebody says, "Oh, you're as beautiful as a rose," if I say that's offensive, that could technically not be free speech. It's weird. Why? Why are we always looking to have wrong? So I disagree with it. And Mill also argued that even offensive speech can lead to progress by challenging societal norms. So basically, what he was saying was, let people say that so you can have this conversation, and you now have this right to say, but hey, blah, blah, blah. That part of it I'll agree with. And then you have the ontological ethics, which is Immanuel Kant. That means people should be treated with dignity and respect. Agreed. Basically, it says if cancel culture leads to harassment, it violates an ethical duty. For example, a software engineer might not hack a network to cancel a missile launch if it violates his professional code of ethics. Then you have the whole utilitarianism. It's a hard word to say, I'm not going to lie. Now, that was also John Stuart Mill, and it included Jeremy Bentham, where the right action is the one that leads to the greatest good for most people. And then you have canceling harmful figures may prevent further harm, but can also create fear and limit open discussion. I agree with all that. I really do. I do think, he kind of hints to, say, 40% of the country is poor, which probably isn't far from that, if not more right now, considering where we're at economically. But let's just say that there's something we can do, and you have the rich, okay? So I would tell you right now, my opinion of Trump and Elon Musk are, they do not believe in utilitarianism, okay? In my opinion, what they're doing as rich people is not really going to benefit poor and middle class. It's going to fall on our backs to handle. When these things happen, it only helps the rich, which are not the greater good. Therefore, the tax cuts used to be for the middle class and poor people, so the rich would have to pay taxes. That would be a prime example of not doing it for the greater good. So we're not carrying on here too long. It aims to improve society as a whole, and it evaluates actions, laws, policies, character traits, and moral code. An example would be fighting extreme poverty, the one that I gave that included Trump and Musk, reducing the suffering of animals on factory farms, so a chicken farm and killing them, humanely. You're looking for the greater good down the road as well, and following road rules. That would be another one. Because if everybody's not following those road rules, accidents happen. People will get hurt. It's for the greater good that we have them. And it can be difficult to predict it in the future. So it's really hard to tell if this is going to be a good thing or a bad thing. And then there's one that I am a fan of, and I try to practice because I really do like it. I resonate with it. And that's virtue ethics. That was developed by Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, and basically should cultivate virtues like, fairness and courage, humility, integrity, honesty. Does cancel culture promote justice, or does it actually encourage mob mentality and excessive punishment? I'm going to say the latter. I don't believe that cancel culture has ever really done anything positive. It forces something. It's not authentic. I would rather someone actually be true to who they are, even if I don't agree. I'd rather people be real with me. That's my personality. I offer that to people. Not everybody can handle me, and that's okay. So that's what that is. I would love to know your thought on that. So the question is, does cancel culture promote justice, or does it encourage mob mentality and excessive punishment? Hit me up on the social medias. We are on Facebook. We are on Instagram, Discord. Yes, we have our own server set up, courtesy of my daughter. We also have Twitter/X, which I will always call it Twitter. So sorry if you're from St. Louis, we always call it Riverport. We can't help it. You can also reach out at an email on h2oquestion question@gmail.com. Again, that's H2O question, not zero, O question@crouton.com. And we have a phone number. You can leave a text, give me a call. May not answer, but if you have something to say, I can play it over the air. It is 1-786-505-2194. Again, that's 1-786-505-2194. And make sure if you want it played on the air that you let me know, and I will be sure to do that on the next episode. It's an ethical theory that focuses on a person's character rather than their actions or their consequences. It basically says, it helps people understand how to be a better person. It gives them guidance to having a good life without bad things, without specific rules, rather, or ethical dilemmas, like not knowing what to do. It will have you instill virtuous habits, courage and loyalty, honesty and wisdom, and all that good stuff. So virtue ethics was actually the dominant approach in Western moral philosophy until around the time of Enlightenment, and then comes back in the late 1950s in Anglo-American philosophy. And it's argued that it's the oldest ethical theory in the world, having roots back in ancient Greece. So, interesting. A virtuous ethic might actually advise someone to act as a virtuous person would act in their situation. So, if a person comes up and goes, hey, I want to be with you, and the guy's like, or the girl's like, hey, I'm married, whoever, guy or girl, and they're tempted, but then they think of someone who is a good person. Maybe they'll even have something come to mind, like a preacher or an elder or someone who they respect, and they'll go, oh gosh, they wouldn't do that. No, I'm not going to do it. So that's basically what that would do and how it works. And I really do resonate with it. It's interesting. I'm going to give you some modern examples of cancel culture. J.K. Rowling. So she was criticized for her comments on gender identity, which led to boycotts, and Harry Potter just went from popular to in no time. It can't force people to think or believe what you think and believe, because you've done that. And it's, even if you do, is it authentic? You'll always question that. Okay, they say they changed, but is it authentic? If it's not authentic, then what's the purpose? And what she said were words. They're just her words. It doesn't, just because she spoke them, wrote them, whatever, it doesn't give them more power any more than it does to make Harry Potter real. So I think it's just something that people need to learn to look at from a different perspective and stop looking for the off. Just look at it like, oh, okay, well, whatever. She said that. Disagree, but whatever. Again, maybe it's Gen X mom and me. Maybe it's just Gen X me. Maybe it's just me. But regardless, I just kind of read things that people say, and I'm like, that was kind of jerkish, whatever. And I move on. Life goes on. I don't care. The fact that there was such a big deal over it then made her more popular with a group of people who will agree with her. So I guarantee it didn't really do much, and it didn't change her. And even if it did, I would always question the authenticity of that. Something to think about. And you have Kevin Hart, right before he was ready to get to host the Oscars. I think it was 2018. All of a sudden, he's got these tweets. Like, who? I have to ask, what person was it that went back into his tweets and started reading these things to actually look for something bad? Like, what was the purpose of that? Why did you do that? How much time do you have? That was strange to me. Now, what he did, I don't know exactly what he said. I just know they were homophobic. And there was change. He actually owned what he said, decided to learn from people, and he's a different person in that respect. So he was able to save his career, and I think that's fantastic. And he was able to open his mind. That's fantastic. But I also hope it helped teach people who decided to try and cancel him that, hey, maybe that approach was wrong and we should have tried this, but I haven't seen any changes since then. Then you have Dave Chappelle. Apparently something he said offended somebody. Shock and awe. I know this never happens. I'm joking. I'm going to say this first. If you went and listened or read something that Dave Chappelle wrote or said, and you didn't expect it to be offensive, you have not been paying attention. Seriously, though, this is a comedic thing that comedians have been doing, God, as far as I've been alive. I grew up in time of Richard Simmons, and these people were always raunchy and very blunt. Eddie Murphy, prime example. But we used to laugh about it. Even the people he was offending, we would laugh because it was kind of relatable. It's just like, oh my God, okay, there was some truth to that. That's absolutely right. We have this ability to be very humble about it, I guess. I don't know if that's the right word I want to say. Just look at it from a different perspective. We never got taught you should be offended by that. You could own who you were that way and own maybe a cultural difference or a woman versus man thing, or kid versus adult, or somebody who was a teacher versus somebody who was a stripper. I don't know. Just throwing this stuff out there. We just learned to laugh at ourselves because it was a different life, and it was much more happy. I mean, you can watch Archie Bunker, he was a clear racist white man, and Thomas Jefferson, Wheezy from the Jeffersons, Sherman, I can't remember his last name. Sherman starts with an H. He would walk in there and he would give him 9 kinds of hell. But it was funny because Jefferson would give it right back to Archie. Archie, by the way, ended up being the chief In the Heat of the Night. It's not who he was as a person. It was just his character. But then you also had Sanford and Son, it was a black dad and a black son who had a tow truck company, I believe. This is from my childhood years, so bear with me if I got anything wrong. And they said the funniest stuff about white people that we would be sitting in our living rooms laughing so hard because it was true. It was absolutely true. If it wasn't us, it was other white people we knew. Just like if it wasn't this black person, it was black people we knew. If it wasn't that woman, it was other women we knew. If it wasn't that man, it was other men. You get the gist. There was always some truth, which is what made it funny. So getting offended by anything Dave Chappelle said just kind of made me laugh, going, I don't know what was said, to be honest, but he's Dave Chappelle. He's Dave Chappelle. Come on now. And then another example would be Will Smith, punching him, which, if you're going to sit there and pick on his wife, who I am not a fan of, Jada, is it Jada? Jada? I keep hearing different things, but I understood. I'm not saying it was right, but I understood why Will got up and did that. And I was like, wow, he just did that. Okay. But I didn't look at him differently. I looked at it as a man. He's going through something. He had just released his book. He had just found out, I think it was shortly before that his wife had been disloyal and had cheated on him. His kids, including his oldest son, sure seemed to love him, even though, he's around all the time. He goes and visits. He's still friends with his ex-wife, by the way. So something has to be good about Will. And you never really hear anything bad about him from anywhere else. He was defending his wife, which I think every man should do that if somebody else were digging at him. But knowing he's a comedian, I also would have learned to laugh that off. And as someone who was friends with him, I would have went up to him later and went, man, just because he's your friend don't mean you should have done that. You need to know how wrong that was. I don't appreciate you doing that. You need to maybe make a public apology or something. But I understood it. Anger is anger. And sometimes celebrities even have knee-jerk reactions. So those are the modern examples. So I'm going to ask some questions and I'm going to answer them. But I also want to hear what your thoughts are by using H2O question at Gmail or the phone number that I gave you before, which is 1-786-505-2194, or hitting me up on our social media accounts. If you want whatever you said shared, if I get enough feedback, I will definitely make another episode about this and read those. And so everybody gets heard. That's who I am. Yes, that means even if you disagree with me, I will 100% read your perspective because it's your opinion and you're entitled. These questions are, number 1, is cancel culture a form of accountability or a threat to free speech? I think it tries to force accountability, which again, I don't feel as authentic. So to me, it's just a waste of time. That accountability needs to be authentic and come from the source without being forced to the source. A threat to free speech? Yeah, because that person has a right to say what they want to say. As long as it's not like threatening to beat somebody up or kill them or cause harm, then I fail to see the problem. They're just names. Water rolling off a duck's back. Remember that. Should people be permanently judged for past mistakes? That depends. That depends on the past mistake made. That depends on the effort put into changing and bettering themselves. It depends on the effort being made to change and better themselves. It depends. It just depends. All right. There is no definitive answer. If it's not a major thing and they've changed, no, move forward, guys. We got enough going on. I don't have the energy to sit there and be mad at somebody for something that happened from a long time ago. I'm just not that person. You know, there's a saying out there that says something about, I don't know why you judge me by my past. I don't live there anymore. So why do you? And that's a good thing that you need to ask yourself. And the last question is, where should the line be drawn between harmful speech and free expression? Well, I think that's pretty simple. If you are doing something that incites violence or riots or causing someone to feel threatened, anything of that nature, or their home feels threatened, or they feel like their family is threatened, then you're out of line. And you need to stop that. Grow up. It ain't cool. It's not funny. And I'll be honest with you, most people doing that are sitting at home in their mama's basement, sitting in their wife beaters next to their blow-up doll, and they think they're funny. They're not funny. They're just mad. I can say why they're mad, but I'm trying to keep my show rated for kids too. So I'm going to watch my P's and Q's and not say another word. Moving on from that, I am going to take a break right now. I'll be back, and we're going to go into the next segment, which is basically talking about the legalities of it all. Where do we stand and what happens? Yada, yada. We'll be right back. So let's move on to the legal perspectives on free speech and cancel cultures. The U.S. legal framework basically says that the First Amendment, people have a right to say what they want to say. We're not China. We allow our citizens to say things, even if it's against our own government. They are allowed. There's nothing wrong with it, but it doesn't prevent private companies or social groups from imposing consequences of that. So, you know what? If there's a farm stand and they put out their political view, they're not, protected from people canceling them. It's a consequence. That's all it comes down to. We have defamation and hate speech laws. So, free speech covers a lot, but speech that, again, incites violence or threats or defames someone can have very serious legal consequences. Like, for example, you can't go out and say, yeah, well, Michael beat up his wife, and Michael didn't actually beat his wife. Well, you can't say that. And if you do, and it is true, it's okay as long as you can prove it. Is cancel culture censorship? My perspective on that one is yes. It's censorship in the right that you're not allowing someone else to say what's on their mind. Your ability to be offended does not trump, and I'm not talking about President Trump here, but it doesn't trump someone else's right to freedom of expression or speech. You're not more important. We're equal. So just because you feel hurt by something doesn't mean you can go, well, you can't say that. Well, they can. Well, then I'm going to cancel them. Okay, well, they knew the consequence. They knew that was a possibility. And if you're successful, then great. That's on you. But if you're not, you're going to feel silly. Legally, cancel culture, it's not government censorship, but it does raise concerns about private suppression of speech in the workplace, in universities, and in social media. Next question is employer rights versus individual expression. What does this mean? It's basically the companies have the right to fire employees for speech that conflicts with their values, but it should an employee's personal views outside of work be grounds for termination? Well, I guess that depends on what your views are. If you're a white police officer who goes to a predominantly white club, which I'm just going to say golfing as an example. I mean, I understand black people golf, okay? Because it is predominantly white. And let's say that particular golf club is notoriously known for having people who are known racists working there. And you're a police officer who's working in a predominantly black neighborhood. That's a problem. Then we need to talk. We need to figure out if that's a good thing or not. Necessarily grounds for termination? Probably not. But maybe you'd be better suited in a neighborhood of people that you clearly are more comfortable with. That's how I see that. And that's coming from somebody who used to work as a police dispatcher. Maybe that'll offer you some insight. And that's what I want people to think about. Then you have the global perspective, To give you an example for comparison purposes, you have Europe who they have hate speech laws that are stricter than us in the U.S. And some countries actually criminalize certain forms of speech. In China, they'll actually use cancel culture on you. So something to think about. They like to control their speech very tightly there. You have cultural impacts like accountability is a positive one. The cultural impact of cancel culture and free speech is positive aspects like accountability and social change. Movements like Me Too, and that's an example, in Black Lives Matter. They used cancel culture to challenge harmful systems that they felt were harmful to them. There's that. There's negative aspects like the fear of open discussion. If somebody comes up and says they want to talk and you start yelling and shutting them down, well, that's negative. It's not getting you anywhere. You don't win. Mob mentality. Cancel culture is mob mentality. It can result in disproportionate punishment, and sometimes it can ruin careers over minor or really outdated mistakes made in the past. So something to think about. If they're not living there, why are you? If they've grown, let's grow with them. It really is that simple. And another one is lack of redemption. Some argue that cancel culture doesn't really allow for growth or second chances, and that's absolutely true. How can they grow if you're shutting them down? They're not. Sit down. Say, hey man, here's what you did. This is why it's offensive. Here's perspective. And they may or may not care. Odds are there's a lot of people that will. Watch your approach. Say what you got to say. Don't beat them down. They may meet you and you may teach them something to make them be a better person. It's a win-win. But if you're shutting them down, well, neither one of you getting anywhere. Then we have a cultural shift. And the cultural shift is a shift in power. Then there's social media that has a shift in power where it allows people rather than institutions to dictate what is acceptable speech. So if someone says something, you no longer have an institution going, oh, hey, you don't get to say that. It is now just Larry down the road has now decided he doesn't like that, and it's over. Ooh, not good. A little power to the people is too much sometimes. We need balance, people. Then you have the generational differences. Younger generations tend to support accountability, while older generations often view cancel culture as an overly punitive. And I would be one of them. I think it's over the top. And it does depend on the situation. It doesn't mean just because I'm against that I am for what they do or say. It just means I believe in their right to say it even if they're wrong. Final questions to consider. I want to hear what you have to say as well. Call me, text me, hit me up on socials, email me. You know the information. I've already given it, and I'll give it one more time at the end. Question is, should there be a statute of limitations on past mistakes? Depends on the situation. That's my answer. It really does depend on the past mistake, because not every mistake is a mistake. Some mistakes are choices. If you have chosen to do something, then that could weigh on my mind. If it was an actual mistake, yes. Yes, most mistakes can be forgiven. And there should be a statute on it going, look, 5 years ago, move on. People grow. People do mentally evolve. Next question. How do we balance accountability with redemption? I don't know that you can. I think there's a problem with authenticity that always comes to play, because I feel like a forced apology is not a real apology, and I don't want nothing to do with it. I have a situation going on in my life right now where I've stood my ground on that, going, I want an authentic apology for what was done, Because if it's forced, it's not real and you're not getting what I'm trying to say. I feel you did this, and I know in my mind, I've actually had counselors tell me about the situation I've had where they verified I was absolutely right. But I don't want somebody just coming to me going, yeah, I'm sorry. Because there's a difference between, yeah, okay, I'm sorry, to, man, I'm so sorry. Good. You've grown. Let's move on. I'm cool. But there are people who just don't know how. And unfortunately, it's just the way the ball rolls. So can you balance accountability with redemption? I guess it depends, again, on the situation. I don't know for sure that even works that way. And the third and final question of this particular segment of the episode is social backlash a legitimate form of free speech itself? Yes. Look, I can't say free speech for me, but not for thee, right? That's not how this works. Free speech is for everybody, whether I like what they're saying or not. Even if I disagree with you canceling someone, you have the right to say you want them canceled. Doesn't mean I'm going to agree with the action or the words, but you have a right to do it. So we're going to be right back after this, and we'll be finishing this up with a few extra little goodies at the end and summarizing everything that we've talked about today. So I will see you then. We'll be right back. Welcome back. It's Jennifer, your favorite Gen X mom, right? We're going to say that, right? How do we fix what's going on? A lot of things going on out there that we need to find a good balance between free speech and accountability and cancel culture that requires a mix of legal and social and personal solutions. So I think some potential ways to handle it would be encourage a nuance over the extremes, distinguish between criticism and cancellation. You know, you can hold somebody accountable and still open a dialogue and not actually permanently exile them into oblivion away from their career. You can do that, and it's completely achievable. People have done it in the past, and people are doing it presently, and there are people who are doing it in the future. Whether you believe that or not, cancel culture will be canceled. And that's going to be a beautiful day, because I don't believe in it unless it's an extreme situation. It's not required for everything. You can also, keep in mind that context matters. Acknowledge when statements are made and whether someone was shown personal growth, if they've mentally evolved, and if the harm was actually intentional. That's pretty important too. If harming someone, saying something very, very cruel was intended, then yeah, you should take that into consideration. But even those people can change. Then, you got to think about promoting free speech while also addressing the harm, because there's content moderation with transparency. Social media platforms like Facebook need to establish the clear, concise rules that they want followed, instead of having their bots randomly select people, because nobody knows what they can and cannot say until the can and cannot say are too late. Not fair. Let's get that stuff out there. Give me a specific list. Don't tell me basically you can't have hate speech. Well, what do you define as hate speech? Is it hate speech or is it offensive? Legal systems like that should clarify those boundaries to prevent suppression of unpopular but non-harmful opinions. Then you have the role of employers and institutions. You have the whole thing with proportional consequences, where employees should differentiate between controversial personal views and workplace misconduct. So, if someone's got a personal view, great. If they're leaving at the door when they come into work, great. But again, there are situations, and every situation needs to be judged individually. It just does. This generalization stuff, you can't get mad at people for generalizing when you're doing the same thing. It's just hypocritical. We're not getting anywhere. Then you have restorative justice approaches. Encouraging those apologies are always legitimate to me. And have redemption instead of this immediate termination. You can say, hey man, you should go apologize, but you need to do it if you really believe it. Hey, you over here, can you come over and tell him why it made you feel that way, and give the employee a chance to actually listen to them and maybe learn. And if they still don't, then do what you gotta do. But everybody's flawed. We've got to stop treating people like there's some kind of SD card installed in us or a USB or an external hard drive that says this is how you respond to. Then you have the whole personal and cultural shifts where you can encourage civil discourse and promote open conversation where people can actually debate the issues without the fear of this immediate backlash of hate and anger and rage. And you don't think like me and I'm mad and you made me feel this way. Stop. Collaborate and listen. But really, just stop. Listen to what's going on. Let other people talk. You talk. Let's have dialogue. Let's get somewhere. And then you've got second chances and growth. You know, if they would accept that mental evolution happened, they should be allowed to demonstrate that change over time. People should be given a chance. I'm not saying you give them a third, fourth, and fifth, but everybody deserves a second chance unless, again, it's something like murder or rape or child something. I don't even want to think about those words, but let's just move forward. Then stop rewarding outrage. You know, social media's algorithm says, oh, hey, there's a lot going on. This is getting a lot of comments. I'm going to send everybody here and start putting these random posts in people's feeds. Facebook, I'm looking at you. And when you do that, that encourages that really bad behavior. It gets me sometimes too. And then I stop and go, wait a minute, I don't even follow that page. Why was it even in my feed? Oh, that's Zuckerberg's algorithm. Got it. Yeah, no, I'm not going to play. I'm done with that game. And then you also have maybe fact check before you cancel people. Don't have this like knee-jerk reaction, this instantaneous response, no impulse control, to just calm and make sure that you're not getting stuff out of context or the wrong information. Learn to live by the standard of trust, but verify. So that's essentially how I feel about that. So the key takeaways here: cancel culture at its best holds people accountable. At its worst, it silences growth and discussion. Therefore, it doesn't really help anybody. The challenge is to ensure accountability without eliminating free speech or the possibility of redemption. So here's some real world examples where accountability was actually achieved without complete cancellation. You have Kevin Hart. He learned from past mistakes by, like I said, I think I mentioned this earlier. He owned it. He listened and learned. He moved forward, and everybody was happy. And Kevin Hart's a stand-up dude. So his apology was probably more easily accepted as authentic because he's pretty real. Another one is Trevor Noah. He apologized and he grew, and now this guy was the host of The Daily Show, and some old tweets. Again, who is going to these old tweets? I need to know the kind of time you have. And why did you do that? Why are you looking for flaws? They find these old tweets, and instead of getting all, mad, he decides, hey, I'm going to chill out. He acknowledged what he did, decided, maybe that wasn't so funny after all, and then decided and told everybody, you know what, I'm going to be a little more mindful of what I've been doing. I'm going to stop. I'm not going to do that no more. I'll be more aware. But I like the fact that he's kind of, I'm flawed. I may do this, but I'm going to try my not to. And that should be acceptable. He wasn't canceled. He did go on to be one of the most respected political comedians. And he proved that genuine growth can actually earn public trust. Then you have James Gunn, he was a director of the Guardians of the Galaxy. And he was fired over these old offensive jokes on Twitter. Again, who are people doing this? Anyway, basically, he immediately was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. It was really immature. I can't believe I said that. And his fans and his colleagues supported him and said, hey, you guys need to give him a chance. This isn't who he is, blah, blah, blah. So instead of, back then when all this was happening, he was fired by Disney, by the way. And Disney, after he did all this, he said, hey, I was wrong. Disney said, okay, you know what? Let's let bygones be bygones. Let him back in. He got his job back, and everybody lived happily ever after, just like a Disney movie. Another one would be from my generation, Monica Lewinsky. She was smack dab in the middle of a scandal with the former president, Bill Clinton, and it involves a blue dress and a stain. And that's all I'm going to say, because I'm sure there are children who are probably maybe potentially listening in. She was shamed a lot. Now, Bill Clinton was impeached. However, it was never finalized in the Senate, so he got to fill out his complete term. Long story short, from there, she went away. She was like, I'm going to go hide. I'm done with these people. Oh my gosh. I mean, what she did was wrong. Yes. She wasn't the only wrong party, though. And there was a man that was still president. She was the one paying the price for the decisions that they both made. So that was kind of weird. But she goes away, and then she comes back like years later. She's said nothing. She's never been anywhere. Nobody's seen her. And she returns as this anti-cyberbullying advocate. And she's been using what she went through to teach other people that, hey, it's what it made me feel like. So I went through. Your approach was wrong. Don't do this. Don't bully people. Blah, blah, blah. Yada, yada. I respect that. So the outcome of that is, instead of being permanently defined by what happened in that scandal, she's able to come back and became respected as a public speaker. I bet she wouldn't have thought that would have ever happened, but she found her way. So some takeaways from everything. Key lessons are: acknowledge it. Own who you are. Own what you said. Own everything. And authentically apologize. That's really important. Okay? It means something to people, but don't just say it to be like, oh, I want to keep my job. I don't want to be canceled. Do it because you mean it. If you don't, you can at least say, you know what? I need to sit back and reflect on what I did and what I said. So I would like some time. Just step away for a while. But then you need to come back and you need to actually acknowledge what happened and what your final decision is on it. And be prepared. If you say, I still feel the same, people may cancel you. That's a consequence. You have the right to say it. They have a right to cancel. And you have a right to respond again. But just own it. Make it right. And then you have the public support. If people decide publicly that they want to support you, then it's kind of this cool thing is they can resist this cancellation for you. Like, people might go, you know what? So and such came back, admitted to this, and they've said they're sorry, so I'm done. And having that support from even a smaller group of people can be beneficial. But again, be authentic. Don't lie and say you're sorry when you're not. That's adding insult to injury. Okay. Lastly is redemption. It is possible if someone demonstrates real change and they want to earn the trust back over time. It is possible. The real world cases we've discussed show that accountability doesn't have to mean permanent cancellation. Here's how these lessons can be applied to like a broader debate. So you have social justice and public accountability. Hold individuals accountable. And you should encourage the reflection and change, not just the punishment. And activists and movements can shift that canceling people to fostering education and dialogue. Open it up. Let's teach more than just the persons involved. Let's go further. An example of that is, instead of just outright canceling someone for offensive statements, provide space for that open dialogue and for learning so they can lead to a more productive outcome. And then there's political and cultural divides. There's nuanced conversations that are more effective than ideological battles. You can encourage debate and engagement rather than boycotts that can prevent further polarization. And some figures have been canceled for expressing political views. Taylor Swift, they've tried to cancel. You've got Eminem, who is not necessarily political, but has been. I want to cancel him because he's offensive. Then stop listening. It's that simple. Just stop listening. Don't support it. We will. I like him. He's funny. Crafty as well. He's very good at what he does. I wish I could rhyme like that, but I can hardly speak sometimes. And here I am running a podcast. What was I thinking? Yeah. But yeah, it's just have a constructive debate that could actually clarify those misunderstandings and promote respect for differing opinion. Because you might learn something from someone if you sit down and you shut up. It's that simple. Just let people tell you their point of view, but then tell them, man, I want to hear you, but I need you to hear me too. But while they're talking, just stop talking. Let people be heard. There's also the role of social media. Like, outrage culture thrives out of viral moments that may actually lack full context or misinformation. So somebody can go, President Biden said blah, blah, blah. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Backtrack. You forgot about half that paragraph. President Biden said that so and such actually said, and he disagreed with it, but you didn't say that. You took it out of context. Something of that nature. That's probably a really bad example, but you get the gist, and that's what's important. Context and factual information are important. And you could actually encourage people to fact check context-based assessments and restore discussions rather than instant backlash. Actually hear people. Then you have the whole educational workplace policies that could be, accountability that should be proportionate and encourage learning. Schools and workplaces should prioritize mediation and education rather than immediate, oh, you're expelled, or rather than immediate, you're expelled or you're fired. And then, like students or employees making an offensive comment should be given an opportunity to learn and change rather than facing expulsion or being fired. You have encouraging redemption and growth. People should be given this room to change instead of just being permanently defined by their past mistakes. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. If you're going to do that to somebody, then it can happen to you. So offer grace. Society should create pathways for those who have been canceled to make amends and contribute positively. Public figures who have made past mistakes should be allowed to engage in meaningful charity, advocacy, or education to show they have grown and maybe teach other people. The final thought, rather than calling it the canceling culture, people outright, maybe we could call it the call-in culture, where mistakes are met with discussion and opportunity for growth. And it could be more ethical and sustainable solution. It really is that simple. Bottom line, if you hear something, check your facts, make sure people said that it wasn't taken out of context, then open the dialogue and go, hey man, read what you said, heard what you said, saw what you did. Can I offer you a little perspective? If they say yes, be open to actually telling them and be mature about it. Don't be a jerk. If you approach somebody with a jerk attitude, you're going to get bad reception to it. Give them space to go, okay, let me think about it. Don't go looking for it either, Twitter searchers. I'm going to have to come up with a clever little nickname for people like you. Don't just go looking for reasons to be offended. Stop that nonsense. If you're going to look, you're going to find it. It's out there. There's stuff out there right now that would offend me. But guess what? I don't go looking for it. I don't know. I think cancel culture is immature. I think it's also pretty arrogant because you have people who are like, you don't like me and I don't like you and therefore I'm going to destroy you. Wait a minute. Sit down, Thanos. It's okay if people don't like you. It is none of your business if people don't like you. You have nothing to do with it. That's their perception of you. And if someone is doing something or saying something that's offensive to you, don't worry about them. Words. Duck, back, water, roll. Remember that. We just need to humble ourselves. We need to not expect more of a human than we're willing to give. Not expect that these humans that we know and maybe even love, that they're not flawed. They're flawed, but so are you. And when someone makes a mistake, instead of just berating the hell out of them, approach it with this mature approach, this mental evolution, so to speak, and go, look, I'm not comfortable with what you did. It made me feel this way. And a lot of people are going to go, man, I am so sorry. I never even thought about that. And you're going to have people who don't. And those are the people you go, not my circus, not my monkeys anyway. And you move on and go back to your circus. Because that's where it's more fun. Okay? So that's my opinion. Again, I want to hear what you have to say. Hit me up on social media. My phone number, text message, email, write it in the sky, just tell me where it's at, whatever. But you get the gist. I am going to get out of here. This has been a very interesting episode that I hope gets you listening, and I hope it gets to the right ears so we can become better people and get places and have some progression. And that's the story for another time. Until then, I'm out of here.